Welcome back to our channel. Check your pocket change. That ordinary Washington quarter could be a hidden jackpot. Some have rare errors worth big money. Stick around, smash that like button, and subscribe for more rare coin secrets. In 1981, the United States Mint was operating at full stride, striking billions of coins to fuel the country's bustling economy. The Washington quarter, long established as a fixture in American commerce, was produced in vast numbers at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities. Its design was instantly recognizable: George Washington's left-facing profile on the obverse, the proud heraldic eagle on the reverse. The copper-nickel-clad composition, introduced in 1965, had become standard by then, replacing the once silver quarters of earlier decades. By all accounts, 1981 should have been an unremarkable year for quarter production, a period where precision and efficiency left little room for notable minting mistakes. And yet, amid the billions of flawless strikes, a small number of coins emerged with a defect so unusual that it would take years for anyone to fully grasp its significance. The coin's journey began quietly, passing unnoticed from hand to hand. It was spent, received as change, stored in drawers, and eventually forgotten. Decades later, a collector with an eye for detail was combing through a small assortment of quarters, pulled from a mixed lot purchased at a flea market. At first glance, the 1981 piece looked unremarkable. The date was clear, the strike sharp enough to suggest it had not been overly worn. Yet something about its appearance was subtly off. The surface had a satin-like finish that didn't quite match the reflective sheen of most circulated coins. When tapped against another quarter, the sound it made was faintly muted, and in hand, it felt just a fraction lighter than expected. Curiosity took over. The collector examined it under magnification, running through mental checklists of possible causes. The edge, which should have revealed a clearly visible copper core sandwiched between the nickel layers, displayed an unusual tone, almost as if the copper band were thinner than normal. The rim itself was slightly irregular in width, a sign that the coin might not have been struck on the correct planchet. The profile of Washington, though distinct, seemed shallower than standard, and on the reverse, the eagle's feathers lacked the depth normally produced by a perfect strike. These clues suggested something beyond ordinary where, perhaps an off-metal error or a planchet mix-up. The early 1980s were not immune to minting anomalies. Though the mint's quality control was rigorous, rare mistakes did slip through. In some cases, leftover planchets from other denominations or even from foreign contracts found their way into presses intended for U.S. coinage. Transitional errors, double strikes, and even partial plating errors had been documented from this era, each commanding attention from the numismatic community. Could this coin be part of one of those rare events? Unable to resist the possibilities, the collector submitted the quarter to a respected grading service. The wait for authentication was filled with restless anticipation, each day stretching longer under the weight of uncertainty. When the grading report finally arrived, it confirmed what the collector had hoped for. This 1981 quarter was indeed a rare mint error, struck on the wrong planchet. Not only that, but the planchet's composition suggested it had been intended for a foreign coinage contract, an unusual and highly collectible category of minting mishap. Over the years, the value of such coins had evolved dramatically. In the early 1980s, few collectors outside of specialized error enthusiasts would have paid a premium for this kind of rarity. By the 1990s, awareness of mint errors grew, and the market began to recognize their appeal. By the 2000s, with online auctions connecting collectors across continents, competition for dramatic mint errors, especially in high-grade condition, was fierce. This particular example's preservation only heightened its desirability, as most known errors from the period showed significant circulation wear. The coin's physical details told its story in quiet ways. Its weight measured slightly less than the standard 5.67 grams, reflecting the different metal composition of its planchet. The strike, though complete, appeared just faint enough in certain design elements to betray the subtle incompatibility between die pressure and metal type. Under light, its luster was less reflective and more diffused than typical clad quarters, an indicator that its surface metal was never intended for that design. The edge, examined closely, revealed an irregular and inconsistent copper layer, Another unmistakable sign of its error origin, a twist emerged when the collector learned from another numismatist that a handful of similar 1981 quarter errors had surfaced in past decades, all tied to the same mint facility. However, those examples were either heavily worn or bore contact marks that diminished their appeal. This coin, in comparison, was in exceptional shape, placing it among the finest known specimens of its kind. That fact elevated it beyond being just a rare mint error. It became a potential centerpiece for a serious collection that, as the years passed, the question remained: keep it as the crown jewel of a personal collection or release it into the high-stakes environment of the numismatic market? The choice was not easy. Such coins rarely appear for sale, and when they do, the bidding can escalate rapidly as collectors compete for ownership of a piece of minting history that simply cannot be replicated. And when the time finally came to understand its worth, the very rare 1981 US quarter-dollar coin of this type was recognized as capable of commanding between $52,000 and $135,000, a staggering value for a coin that once slipped unnoticed through countless hands. In 1985, the United States Mint was in the midst of its steady, high-volume production of circulating coinage. The Washington quarter, unchanged in design for decades, was struck in massive numbers at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. By this time, the copper-nickel-clad composition had been in use for 20 years, replacing the silver quarters of earlier generations. Minting technology was efficient, dies were precise, and quality control procedures caught the vast majority of mistakes before they could ever reach the public. The 1985 quarters entering circulation that year were expected to be uniform, flawless, and utterly ordinary. Yet, somewhere in the machinery of the mint, a rare and unexpected error occurred, one that would only reveal itself to the right pair of eyes years later. For most of its early life, this coin went unnoticed, passed along and changed countless times, living the anonymous life of any quarter. It wasn't until decades later, when a collector pored over a box of mixed change purchased from an estate sale, that it began to stand out. At first, the difference was nearly imperceptible, just a slightly muted surface luster, a softer ring when tapped against another coin, and a weight that felt ever so subtly off. For a trained hand, however, such small inconsistencies can speak volumes. Examining it under magnification, the collector began to notice a series of details that didn't align with standard production. The rim was faintly uneven in thickness, as though the metal had not completely filled out under the die strike. The copper core along the edge was not as prominently visible as on a typical quarter, its band appearing unusually thin and slightly discolored. Washington's profile, while complete, seemed just a fraction shallower, as though the die's impression had been dulled against an incompatible metal surface. These were the subtle hallmarks of a coin struck on the wrong planchet, a rare and highly sought-after type of mint error. The 1980s were not a period often associated with dramatic minting mistakes, but they did happen. Occasionally, planchets intended for other denominations or even for foreign coin contracts would be fed into presses fitted with quarter dies. The result was a US coin struck on a metal disc never meant for it, producing slight changes in weight, tone, and strike depth. Such coins were supposed to be caught during inspection, but every now and then one would slip through, finding its way into circulation like a ghost in the system. The collector decided the coin warranted authentication and submitted it to a leading grading service. The waiting period was filled with anticipation and the quiet hope that this small anomaly might prove to be something extraordinary. When the results arrived, they confirmed that the quarter had indeed been struck on an off-metal planchet, likely intended for a foreign coin. Not only was the error rare, but the coin's high level of preservation set it apart from most similar finds, many of which showed heavy wear from circulation. Tracking the market for such coins over the years revealed an impressive trajectory in value. In the mid-1980s, even if someone had recognized the error, it might have sold for only a small premium to a niche collector. By the early 2000s, however, the rise of online auction platforms and a surge in interest for dramatic mint errors drove prices upward. Collectors and investors alike recognized the appeal of coins that combined rarity, an intriguing backstory, and a visible departure from the norm, all while bearing a familiar modern date. Physically, the coin told its story in understated ways. Its weight was marginally less than the standard 5.67 grams. The strike was slightly weaker in certain design elements, particularly in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers on the reverse. The surface luster carried a softer glow, and the metal's tone differed subtly from the expected bright silvery finish. The edge milling was faintly irregular, another indicator that the planchet was not the standard copper-nickel clad stock. The twist in the story came during a conversation at a major numismatic convention. The collector learned that other 1985 quarter errors had surfaced over the years, but almost all had significant wear, their details dulled from decades of circulation. This example, by contrast, retained sharp definition, making it one of the finest known specimens of its type. That distinction elevated its desirability dramatically, ensuring that, should it be offered at auction, it would draw intense competition. Owning such a coin presented a choice: keep it as the pinnacle of a personal collection or release it into the marketplace, where its value would be tested by eager bidders. The rarity, combined with its exceptional preservation, made it the kind of piece that collectors might wait a lifetime to find. And when the moment came to assign its worth, the very rare 1985 US quarter-dollar coin of this kind was recognized as capable of commanding between $45,000 and $125,000, an extraordinary fate for a coin that once passed quietly through everyday hands. In 1988, the United States Mint continued the long tradition of producing the Washington quarter in enormous numbers, with the Philadelphia and Denver facilities striking hundreds of millions of them for circulation. The design was instantly familiar: George Washington's profile on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, and the copper-nickel-clad composition had been standard for more than 2 decades. The minting process was precise, the quality control stringent, and the chances of a major error escaping detection were slim. Yet, as history has shown time and again, even in the most controlled environments, rare mistakes can slip through unnoticed, hiding in plain sight until the right person discovers them. For years, one such quarter passed quietly from hand to hand. It was used to buy coffee, tossed in coin jars, and jingled in pockets without anyone giving it a second thought. Then, decades later, a collector sorting through a batch of mixed coins from a yard sale spotted it. At first, there was nothing obviously unusual. The date 1988 was clear, the strike looked sharp, and there were no dramatic die cracks or doubling to grab attention. But the coin felt different. The surface luster was softer, almost satin-like rather than the bright metallic shine of a typical clad quarter. Its sound when tapped against another coin was slightly muted, and in hand, it felt ever so subtly lighter than expected. The collector's instincts, honed over years of experience, kicked in. Under magnification, the differences became more telling. The rim's thickness varied faintly, and the copper core visible along the edge seemed thinner and oddly toned. Washington's profile appeared a touch shallower, and the eagle on the reverse lacked some of the sharp relief seen on standard strikes. These clues pointed toward the possibility of an off-metal error, a type of mint mistake in which the coin is struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even for a foreign coin. Research into minting anomalies of the late 1980s showed that while errors were uncommon, they did occur. Planchets meant for other coins occasionally slipped into the presses, creating rare hybrids that looked normal to the casual eye but revealed their uniqueness under close scrutiny. Such coins were typically caught before leaving the mint, but the few that escaped would blend seamlessly into circulation for years. Recognizing the potential significance, the collector submitted the coin to a respected grading service for authentication. The wait was tense, each passing day filled with speculation about whether this could be something truly special. When the results came in, the confirmation was decisive. This 1988 quarter had been struck on the wrong planchet. Its composition differed from the standard copper-nickel clad, and its weight was slightly under the usual 5.67 grams. Not only was this a rare error, but the coin's preservation made it exceptional, with minimal wear and strong remaining detail. The collector began tracking the market for similar finds, noting how their value had risen over time. In the late 1980s, a coin like this might have been sold for only a modest premium. By the 1990s, as error coin collecting became more mainstream, the demand grew. By the 2000s, with online marketplaces connecting collectors globally, prices for dramatic off-metal errors soared. This 1988 example, in such fine condition, was no longer just an oddity. It had become a highly desirable prize. The coin's physical traits revealed its story to those who knew how to look. Its lighter weight reflected the non-standard planchet, while the muted luster spoke to a different metal composition. The strike, though complete, was subtly weaker in certain design elements, a telltale sign of the mismatch between dies and planchet material. Even the milling along the edge displayed faint irregularities, another confirmation of its unique origin. The twist in its history emerged when the collector learned that a handful of other 1988 off-metal quarters had been documented, all traced back to the same mint facility. However, nearly all of them showed heavy circulation wear, dulling their details and reducing their value. This coin's sharpness and condition set it apart, making it potentially the best preserved example known. That fact alone transformed it from rare to extraordinary. Faced with the decision of whether to keep or sell, the collector weighed the coin's personal significance against the lure of seeing it compete in the auction market. Such coins were seldom offered, and when they appeared, they attracted aggressive bidding from collectors eager to own a tangible piece of minting history, and when its value was finally measured against the market's hunger for rarity and condition, the very rare 1988 US $quarter coin of this kind proved capable of commanding between $40,000 and $120,000, an astonishing fate for a piece of change that once passed unnoticed through countless hands.